And Chanyo has mentioned a lot about our result and also mentioned the WCAG and W3C. The W3C works on the improvement of accessibility of the web for people with disabilities and older users. And today we have the pleasure to have the Director of Web Accessibility Initiative at the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, Judy Brewer, to be with us, to be our speaker. Judy directs the Web Accessibility Initiative at the World Wide Web Consortium, and she coordinates accessibility policy and standardization issues for W3C internationally, promoting awareness and implementation of web accessibility and ensuring effective dialogue among industries, the disability community, accessibility researchers, and government on the development of consent-based accessibility solutions. So may we now have pass the time to Judy to give us the speech on the web accessibility. Judy, please.
Thank you very much. Let me make sure that my audio is coming through while I also start to share my screen so that my slides can show. Is my audio all right? Okay, I'm getting a nod. So let me see. And I'm just going to run back just a moment.
PowerPoint slides. We would like to invite any questions from audience. You may type the questions in the chat box. Yeah.
So I will be showing slides which I will be completely voicing. I wanted to start with greetings. Thank you very much for inviting me to join you at the launch of the World Blind Union Asia Pacific Regional Survey Report. It's wonderful to be able to connect across the distance at this difficult time. I hope that you are all safe and well. It's a great pleasure for me to be the virtual guest of my colleagues at Hong Kong Blind Union, an organization that's been working on the forefront of digital accessibility for many years, not only in Hong Kong, but also in the Asia Pacific region. And I wanted to congratulate Hong Kong Blind Union on this survey. Data is essential if we want to change the web. The survey asks some very important questions. What policies are in place for web accessibility? How aware are respondents of available resources to learn and to implement? And how well do websites perform on selected measures? And while the survey was based only on some selected indicators, it nevertheless sheds light on important trends. It shows a high degree of standards harmonization and awareness, but a low degree of implementation across different important market sectors. The data helps focus efforts to improve the web for people with disabilities. It helps support questions such as, would additional awareness campaigns be useful? If so, what messages might get through the best? What sector by sector partnering helps spread the message? And I particularly mention partnering because I know from many visits with Hong Kong Blind Union colleagues over the years that this is an organization that excels in finding good partners in universities and in different industry sectors to try to ensure awareness and implementation. What additional resources might help from an educational perspective? Would more translated material help, possibly? And what can we do to promote continuing standards harmonization and uptake among policymakers. The World Wide Web Consortium was founded by Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the web, and in the summer of 2012, he had the opportunity to tweet from the Central Stadium at the Summer Olympics. And the message that he sent up around the stairs to the stadium was, "This is for everyone." And those of us who work at W3C found that very moving, because that has always been one of the foundational concepts for W3C's work. And it's especially important for people with disabilities who work in the Web Accessibility Initiative at W3C. The web needs to be for everyone. The World Wide Web Consortium develops standards for the web. It's an international vendor-neutral community co-hosted in the United States, Europe, Japan, and China. We develop hundreds of technical standards per year. We use an open consensus process to develop free standards, and we always try to ensure that there are many different perspectives working together: industry, disability, research, education, government, and more. And it includes the Web Accessibility Initiative as part of its Web for All commitment. The web has become far more than it was initially. It's now the foundation through a combination of technologies: HTML5, document object model, accessible rich internet applications, otherwise known as ARIA, which all have built-in accessibility. This is a foundation now for mobile, for publishing, for virtual and augmented reality, for the Internet of Things and Web of Things, for media, TV, entertainment, and games, even for automotive, the navigation, the passenger side, the fueling, and so forth. That can be driven partly over the web, for payments and secure authentication. So all of these areas, if they're based on web technologies from W3C, can enjoy the benefit of technologies that have been designed to be accessible from the start. In 2011, the World Health Organization report on disability found that there were 1 billion people in the world living with a significant disability. Many of those disabilities can affect access to digital technologies. And from our perspective, digital accessibility crosses many different disability or functional areas, including vision, hearing, motor, speech, cognitive, neurological, combinations of disabilities, aging-related conditions, and more. And so we need digital technologies to be designed in ways that works for all of us. The great part is when you plan from the design stage, you can make almost anything accessible, and accessibility can also be one of the best innovation drivers for technology design. What's different during COVID? Fred and Chanyo have already commented on this, and I will just add my voice to saying that ensuring accessibility of all the digital technologies that we rely on as people with disabilities is absolutely essential, absolutely critical at this time. Some people are needing to conduct their lives almost fully in a remote mode. In some cases, it's hybrid, where some people being remote and some people being able to do activities in person, but that may rotate on and off according to how the pandemic is impacting different communities at different times. There are many accessibility barriers with even something as fundamental to daily life now as remote video conferencing. There can be barriers to screen reader interoperability. There can be barriers to accessing streaming captions and interpreters for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. There can be problems with pinning key views of key accessibility information in online presentations. There are cognitive barriers to understanding video conference controls. And in addition to remote video conferences, there's also barriers to accessibility in online learning and telehealth and finance and more. Many aspects of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, are relevant for ensuring accessibility of remote meetings. One of the things we're doing currently is to take our guidelines and map them against this new world of everything being online. So the Web Accessibility Initiative, or WAI for short, is a coordinated program of accessibility work that's now integrated throughout W3C. We develop accessibility reviews of every W3C standard as needed. We develop accessibility standards and guidelines, technical, educational, and training resources to improve accessibility evaluation. We coordinate with research efforts, and we promote standards harmonization, because that's one of the best accelerators of digital accessibility. WAI guidelines are critical to ensuring information technology accessibility. They help ensure equal access to information and communications and provide the foundation for all those different technologies that I mentioned earlier that are merging onto the web: mobile accessibility, document accessibility, publishing, automotive, virtual reality, and so forth. There's very specific benefits that come from harmonized standards for accessibility. It's easier to support sharing of technical and educational materials when you use a common set of accessibility standards internationally. You can support shared development of authoring tools and evaluation tools. You can support combined efforts to research, maintain, and evolve the accessibility standards. WAI guidelines have been taken up already into over 40 countries. It may be more than that now. It includes the updated European norm, multiple laws in the US, and updated Chinese national standard. And it's the most common recommendation for implementing the information technology accessibility articles of the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities. One of the efforts that we've been making over the past 2 years now is to try to increase translations of WAI standards and resources. So we have a collection now. If you were to search on W3C WAI site just for all WAI translations, you would find, among other things, 19 completed authorized translations of WCAG. And that's, the authorized translations are where the translations are done very carefully with a small community that is actually vetting the translation. They're reviewing it to make sure that the disability community agrees with the terminology the industry is using, and vice versa. And it's actually a good consensus building process. Several Asia-Pacific languages that we have some translations available in include Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. We would love to have every Asia-Pacific language represented at some point. It will be maybe a long time to get there, but we do have guidance for translating WAI resources, and we do have priorities, a list of documents that we recommend starting with if you want to get a core of introductory material in the language of your choice, to be able to share that information with colleagues. I want to just give an example of some of the resources we have available in one language, Chinese. That includes a W3C accessibility standards overview. And some of these are very short introductory pieces, so they're easy to translate. Mobile accessibility at W3C, again, web content accessibility guidelines, applies to much of what's needed for mobile accessibility. We encourage people to use it for that. An introduction to web accessibility, accessibility principles. There's a video introduction to web accessibility and W3C standards. And then there are translations of WCAG 2.0, 2.1, and also the authoring tool accessibility guidelines, which I'll say a little bit more later on. So please read those if you're looking for resources in Chinese. Enjoy and implement if you can. If you're trying to make the web accessible, where do you start? Well, the goal is for the content and the applications to work across all disabilities. And so you need guidelines for that. We call those the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. And they address perceivability of information, operability, understandability, and also that the accessibility should be robust as different technologies change and evolve. This is considered an international standard that's also endorsed by International Standards Organization. And it's been adopted and referenced by many national governments, as I've mentioned. WCAG 2.1, what's different in that is that it expanded provisions for mobile accessibility, for low vision, and cognitive accessibility. It's backwards compatible with WCAG 2.0. If something conforms to 2.0, those parts will still be good, but it evolves to cover some additional things. And there's updated support materials, such as techniques and understanding. What we're working on now is two different things. One is another update to the 2 series, and we're expecting that to be done in second quarter of 2021. That'll be WCAG 2.2. Additionally, we're working on what we consider our next generation guidelines. You may have heard them referred to as silver guidelines. We're calling those now W3C content accessibility guidelines and the W3C accessibility guidelines 3.0. Those are in early development, and there will be a number of changes with those, including covering a broader range of technologies, so virtual reality as well, for instance, and then also with a somewhat different conformance model to evolve according to how the web is evolving. So stay tuned for more information on that, or find a way to get involved if you would like. For producing accessible content, the authoring tools, the evaluation tools you use to build sites, we also have guidelines. Those are called the Authoring Tool Accessibility Guidelines, ATAG 2.0. They address HTML editors, content management systems, otherwise known as CMS, any social media tools such as wikis and blogs. And what you want is you want to, on the one hand, support production of accessible content and applications, but also ensure accessibility of the authoring tool interface, because obviously people with disabilities want to be able to create content as well. So using authoring tools that conform to accessibility can be a breakthrough. They help reduce the cost of developing accessible content and ensure an inclusive contribution to the web. Also, we have to think about browsers, media players, and mobile devices. So we have the user agent accessibility guidelines 2.0, and they follow the same principles as WCAG. The content should be the content and operation should be perceivable, operable, understandable, have programmatic access, and use accessibility specifications and conventions that already exist. And this is something, if you're looking to help us build the future of digital accessibility, we should be leveraging artificial intelligence, machine learning, the smart capabilities of browsers in favor of accessibility. So that's a project to work on together for the future. People may be familiar with the Accessible Rich Internet Applications, ARIA. This is an accessibility specification that provides expanded capabilities for the dynamic, interactive web content and applications. So 1.1 completed in 2017, 1.2 is moving close to completion in coming months. And there's a lot of, for developers, there's more and more APIs. Those are the application programming interface and mappings, so that ARIA can work with every technology. There's improved support for graphics. We keep expanding the capabilities. So now, from a practical standpoint, people want to be able to test websites and find out, hey, did we make this accessible? And I think of testing sometimes in 3 buckets. My colleagues keep reminding me to think of it as a continuum. But you have maybe a third of the accessibility tests that require human experts for qualitative evaluation that requires some judgment. And then you have semi-automated tests where maybe an image on a website would be flagged, automatically, but then a human needs to check and say, is that the right alternative text for that context? And then you have tests that can be done on a fully automated basis. But right now, that might be only a third of the tests or so. Those are objective, quantitative, logical tests. So developers want to know, are we accessible yet? Can we get more reliable answers faster? Some of the challenges include, we need standardized interpretations of test rules. So we're building those. We need to increase the automation of tests. That requires a large repository of accessible samples and inaccessible samples to test against. So we're partnering with different organizations around the world to develop those samples. And we're developing a standard format for test rules, and eventually that will support machine learning approaches to testing that can automatically identify patterns, images, and more reliably interpret meaning in the surrounding context of pages. We're also trying to build collaboratively with organizations around the world an ecosystem of accessibility resources, educational resources, and resources supporting implementation that includes conceptual introductions to accessibility, such as the Way Perspectives videos. There's, I think, 10 of those, and they're like 1 minute a piece. So they're the kind of thing you can take to a colleague who doesn't have a technical foundation and say, hey, it actually matters if there's, if there's a color contrast and somebody's low vision, so they can still make out what's in that image. There's a developer's reference called WCAG 2 Quick Reference, or How to Meet WCAG 2. We have an introductory course that I'll say more about in a minute. We have scenario-based introductions to accessibility, such as how people with disabilities use the web, that talks about, if there's a teenager who is deaf and blind and they want to go out with their friends for the evening, how can they find accessible social media? So it walks people through those scenarios. There are developer tips. There's a business case you can customize inside your organization. And I don't know if people are familiar with the TED Talks, the Technology, Education, and Design. I did one last year, pre-pandemic, on creating an accessible digital future. That's the kind of thing you can also use as an introduction for people. We're hoping to eventually translate that as well. So right now, I'm just showing some images from the set of Perspectives videos. There's like 9 different panels, and most of these are set in kind of people's homes and just showing this is the way people, like real people, use technology. So it's a good way to introduce people. I mentioned the Mooc, Massive Open Online Course, Introduction to Web Accessibility. We've had, I think, over 16,000 people take this now. And so it's a full accessibility, it's a full course on what is web accessibility, how do people with disabilities use technology, what are the principles, where do you find resources to develop. It's free. It's based on an authoritative curriculum developed in our Education Outreach Working Group at WAY. And it's also, there's a certificate that's paid if people want to prove that at work and so forth, but it's a learning resource that we also want to translate and make available much more worldwide, including on platforms that are easier to access in some countries than the current edX platform we have at our. There are many different ways to participate in the Web Accessibility Initiative. So I want to welcome you to check us out if you haven't before. Look at the drafts that we publish for worldwide review. Draft guidelines, draft specifications, educational resources. Look at our WCAG 2.2 that's under development. Let us know if you think we've got it right or not. We're at the stage right now where we cannot add new things, but we need feedback on the parts we have added. Send us comments to improve drafts, help translate if you want, and if you have resources, check out our working groups, task forces, and so forth. I have, I think, just one or so more slides. I'm hearing some audio, so I'm assuming I should be wrapping up in a moment. But I will just say there are many ways to promote digital accessibility, in encouraging more policies, harmonizing with international standards, promoting awareness, focusing particularly on authoring tools, since those are give leverage across hundreds or thousands of sites, not just one site at a time. Leveraging artificial intelligence to make accessibility more efficient in the future. Monitoring the implementation, such as with Hong Kong Blind Union's survey. They're saying there's a policy, but is the implementation real? And promoting accessibility as an innovation driver. So you can find more about our program at w3.org/WAI. Again, w3.org/WAI for Web Accessibility Initiative. And again, congratulations to Hong Kong Blind Union. Thank you so much for the chance to talk more about web accessibility and digital accessibility.
Thank you so much, Judy.